just how successful video games are as an industry, you could bet that it wouldn't be long after their ascension into mainstream media that Hollywood would want to get in on the action and tap into some of that revenue. After all, with video games enjoying large numbers of fans, you'd think that a movie based on a beloved game would appeal to them, right? Wrong. For some reason, video games generally haven't made a successful transition from home TVs to the big screen. Why do you think that is? What do you think could make a successful game-based movie? Listen in as our panel discuss the finicky issue right here on Downloadable Content. Welcome, one and all, to Downloadable Content. I, and always will be, Brian, and we are joined by a completely new cast of characters. We start off with Nick.
Hey, what's up?
Danielle.
Good evening.
And Grendel.
YOLO.
No Ron, no Peter, no Erica for this one. That's because they're all, being responsible, like, going to school and work and things. So on this particular episode, we are going to discuss the finicky and often tragic tale of video game-based movies. There have been many, many video games that have been made into movies, some more successful than others, most of them abysmal.
Yeah.
And yet... I know. I'm sorry, Danielle, I know. There were a few good ones in there, and we'll definitely get to those during the course of the discussion. But let's us dive right into the discussion. We're going to start with probably the first movie that was released theatrically in the United States. We're going to start off with Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, that brings some memories. Real bad ones, too.
The surprising thing is I actually never saw this movie when it came out. I didn't actually end up seeing this movie until I was in college. And once I saw it, I realized why I never saw it when it was released to begin with.
You had a brain?
Well,
No, I think his parents were forgiving.
either that or my parents really didn't give a shit. But
Either that or, you could always be afraid of Child Protective Services coming through the door.
and the movie starred a few, big name stars. It had Dennis Hopper as King Koopa. It had
This Hopper. The poor guy has suffered through so much.
John Leguizamo as Luigi, and Bob Hoskins as Mario. So you had some big name.
Jesus me.
You had some big name actors in there, and it was. You'd think that with Mario Brothers being as great as they were, you'd think that a movie based on them would do very well. I mean, if memory serves me correctly, Mario Brothers came out in either 89 or 90. I could be wrong.
Wait, like the original Super Mario Brothers game? Or
No, the movie.
The movie came out on May 28th, 1993.
Much so later than I thought. So 93 at that point, Sega was already cutting into Nintendo's market share with Sonic. So
At the time, we would have been what? I would have been 7 at the time. 7 or 8.
I was 8.
So,
But
Right.
then,
at the time, we had, Mario, Luigi. The princess in the movie was Daisy, which doesn't make sense, because if you think back at Super Mario Land, Princess Daisy was the princess of Sarasara Land, not the Mushroom Kingdom, so that was off right there.
nerd alert.
Oh, hush
okay,
you.
but you gotta understand, since when does Hollywood actually look at the details?
That is true. At least they got the Yoshi part right.
Jumped right out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Well, if you're gonna rip off someone, rip from someone good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
At least Bob Hoskins looked like Mario.
Can't guarantee the same results.
Didn't look like Luigi at all. Didn't even
Well,
have,
he was lacking the mustache, I think.
just needed like a big mustache.
Yeah, and, so there were some pretty high hopes for this movie. However, what ended up happening when it was released was it got horrible reviews. Very, very bad reviews. It was made on a budget of $48 million. It ended up making only $21 million. So a giant flop for a franchise that was very, very popular. The success of the video game did not translate over to the big screen at all.
Well, it was just because the people behind it just didn't get the details right. I mean, it's simple as that.
Bowser was the guy in a suit for most of that.
Until he turned into a dinosaur, which
For
I
5
guess that
seconds,
makes
he
sense.
melted.
Well, it's the same problem. They just don't look at the details. They don't carry the same charm that the video game got. That brought in all its fans.
All right. Well,
And you
elaborate on
can
that
completely
further.
different direction.
And you couldn't help but feel that this was a sign of the times to come, that this flop probably led to all the future gaming flops that we've seen in the last 20 or so years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Imagine if Mario was a hit, maybe we would see many more better gaming movies, if not more gaming movies in general.
So basically what you're suggesting is that because this first major video game based movie did so poorly, you're thinking it kind of set the bar really low for all movies that followed it.
Well, just have a look at the list and you can understand why I think that.
Well, we'll get to those, but I mean, when I saw Super Mario Brothers, I remember that there was a bit of gamer talk. You have Super Mario Brothers. So I remember one of the points I remember of the movie is the deal with Mario, the brothers' last name. Mario, and Luigi Mario. But again, I'm like, really?
Your first name's your last name.
Really?
At that point, you just want to when you grow up and you find out, you just want to punch your parents in the face.
I mean, you could tell that Miyamoto almost had nothing to do with this movie. It was...
No, at the time, Nintendo just pretty much handed it off and then walked away. That would not happen today.
This is your problem child now.
Yeah. So, despite doing so poorly, I mean, there were a few notable elements, like Yoshi, who wasn't the cute, cuddly green thing that we all come to know and love.
Oh, it was kind of cute.
Yeah, in the rip your head off sort of way.
Grendel, what were you saying?
Said he was like a velociraptor. They just took one of the raptors from Jurassic Park.
Yep.
Yes! That's more accurate than it ever should be.
When I saw Yoshi, I went, really? Really? He's part Cuisinart. He's part KitchenAid.
The part that really stood out for me in the movie, I had the misfortune of watching it again a few months back, and I saw the scene of the Babam.
Your soul?
Look, we were MST3K'ing it, all right.
Okay, that's acceptable.
Okay.
I have a lot of friends with very good senses of humor. It really helps the soul. Anyway, I saw the Babam scene, and it's walking along the wall and upside down in the crate, which...
Babam.
How does that work, first off? But something caught my eye that everyone seemed to miss, and I paused it and found out that at the bottom of this Babam shoe, walking upside down on a grate, it had a Reebok symbol on it.
Oh, product placement.
Really, really bad product placement.
1993, that's expected.
Well, I guess that's where they got their budget.
Yeah, most of it, and you could kind of see why Reebok kind of went into a tailspin shortly afterwards.
They still exist. They do.
They do exist.
But they're not as widely known now. I mean, you say Reebok or Nike, who's going to remember which one right off the bat?
True.
I got me some Jordans.
Oh, hit him.
You can't. I am 150 miles away.
Oh, I'll figure out a way.
Jump
So
product placement. Put the Nike swoosh on the jump boots they had.
Oh, the ones with the little pump on it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those bastard of a jumping boot. God, yeah.
Like rocket powered.
As seen in Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah.
So, after the dismal, horrible failure that was Super Mario Brothers, which failed to enlighten... I didn't even see a single one-up mushroom in there.
Injustice!
I know. Nothing in Mario Brothers games that we've come to know and love, really was in the movie, No Mushroom Kingdom was this post-apocalyptic evil sort of...
Bowser won.
Dinosaur people.
Yeah. It's...
The Goombas were as big as Mario.
Really? Really? So, Mario Brothers...
It's a simpler time.
the Mario Brothers movie, I should say, did horribly, I feel, because it really had not a lot of elements in the game. And, again, a lot of the things that were from the game, we weren't used to. I mean, we're not used to human-looking Bowser.
They couldn't have even done CG. Well, I guess CG wasn't around back in '93, but still.
Not good CGI, anyway.
Yeah, not good, but it was around. It would just, blow their, $48 million budget?
Yeah.
Yeah, true enough.
So,
yeah.
However, we move on to a movie some years later that would enjoy some success. We move on to the first Mortal Kombat movie.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah, that actually was pretty good.
Again, let's hear the numbers. The budget, it was made by New Line Cinema, and I had a feeling when I first saw it, when this movie was made, the Mortal Kombat franchise was in full swing. It was enjoying waves of popularity, both in the arcade and on the home console market. It was enjoying a lot of success, so once again, Hollywood went, popular video game series. Let's make a movie!
Also, there's a lot of controversy behind the video game that helped, with the whole marketing aspect.
Thank you, Mr. Lieberman.
Yes. Yes, it was all that's you bring up a good point, Danielle. It was also fueled by the violent video game controversy of the time. So people wanted to know, well, what is this? They're curious. So New Line Cinema made it, and it employed, for me at the time, I knew just one actor from the movie. I knew Christopher Lambert.
Hell yeah.
As Raiden. The movie was made on a budget of $20 million, and it ended up making a huge profit, $122 million. I felt that I love the first movie. I still watch it.
Hell yeah.
I mean, now, at age 25, it looks a bit campy and goofy in places, but at the time, when I first saw it, I'm like, yeah!
This was a very badass movie, and I mean, I was, 10 when it came out? And I do have the fortune of saying I've seen both of these Mortal Kombat films at the release.
The second one wasn't nearly as good as the first.
We'll get to that.
Sure. But
The first one had all you really needed for Mortal Kombat movie. They fought and killed each other.
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah, non-stop action-packed thrill ride.
Also, from my perspective, the first game kept pretty well aligned with the story. It didn't take gigantic liberties with the plot.
Well, there really wasn't much of one to begin with. I think that's why it was so easy to follow.
That too. I mean, but the video game series at that time had enough of a loose tentative plot to have a successful suspension of disbelief. It was, the plot was pretty easy to follow. It was obviously the success reflected it at the box office, and for those reasons, I think it was a great movie. I mean, certainly covered up the mistakes that Mario Brothers had made.
And the couple of movies between the two films.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
So $122 million worldwide. So, naturally, when a movie gets success, Hollywood goes, let's make a sequel!
Of course. That's like Hollywood's knee-jerk reaction.
Let's make a sequel! Well, the first
That's our knee-jerk reaction to anything nowadays.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you've got... I read earlier, the top 25 films of last year, 23 of them were sequels.
Whoops.
It's like something with that had to do with a franchise.
Now,
yeah, originality!
Now, Grendel, did you see the first two Mortal Kombat movies?
Yeah, I saw the first two. I didn't know there were anyone past the first two.
Well, the third one is in development hell right now.
Oh, okay.
So they keep trying to get it off the ground. It hasn't been all that successful. But the second movie took what was great about the first movie and put it in the paper shredder.
No Christopher Lambert.
No Christopher Lambert. No, so a lot of the cast ended up getting replaced. Different...
They pulled off Johnny Cage right at the beginning.
I know.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's okay. The second movie, I don't know what they decided to do with the second movie. They just took everything that was great about it and went, throw it away. It just became more of a, let's stick in as many Mortal Kombat characters as we possibly can.
I feel like Nightwolf shows up for 5 minutes. Hi there, leaves. Learn your animality. Bye.
Some characters, I think I remember either Cyrax or Sector in the movie.
Cyrax.
It's been so long since I've seen it. I've only seen it once from beginning to end, and for that reason. Just too many characters, too many things going on at once, and a lot of bad actors. I think if they even kept Christopher Lambert as Raiden, it might have been a little bit more salvageable.
Yeah.
Because, there can be only one. I think the only original actor from the first movie was Liu Kang, I think.
Let's have a look.
While Stats is looking at that, while the first movie made $122 million, the second Mortal Kombat movie had a bigger budget of $30 million and made just $51 million. So a giant cut in the profit that Mortal Kombat 2 made. So this is why Mortal Kombat 3, the third movie, is in development hell.
Yeah, according to this, there's only one actor that was in both movies, Robin Shou?
Liu Kang. So the actor who played Liu Kang.
Yeah, because I think he was in one of the Ninja Turtle movies before that, too. The second one.
Regardless, the second movie, I couldn't believe just how bad the second movie was. I can't watch it now. I can only get through 10 minutes of it without going, oh god.
Well, I guess that's just on you guys, but, growing up, I guess I loved these types of films. And I can stomach it probably easier than you can, but I have fun watching it just for what it is.
Okay. Elaborate some more on that.
Well, I don't know. It's so cheesy. It's so stupid. But it still kept me mindlessly entertained throughout the entire thing.
So it's one of those so bad it's good.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's like if you watched Zardoz. It's the most terrible film ever created, but you still watch it because it's just oddly enthralling. Same goes with this movie. And despite how bad it is and how bad the computer animation in some parts for the animalities were, I'd still watch it.
Okay, that's a different take on it. I mean, I guess if you think that, if you forget about the fact that the movie is trying to take itself seriously,
Yeah.
you can potentially enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to distance yourself from logic.
We are quite capable of that.
But some aren't as capable as others. I mean, you have to put prejudice and, all logic concerning video games aside and just enjoy it as a movie.
That's true. You're always going to have purists.
Yes.
No matter what you do. Which is one of the reasons why, some movies do better than others. Some really don't. I mean, again, Mortal Kombat 2, seeing the sharp drop in profits, there were probably a lot of people who enjoyed the first movie, expected the second movie to be similar, and the cheese factor killed it.
Well, especially since the fact that the first one ended on a, hey, there's going to be a sequel, we better watch this to see what happens note.
Yes, that's very true.
So it kind of tricked everybody into watching it because you thought that you were going to get a finished story, like things were going to continue.
And they did, but badly.
Yeah, well, we expected more, as we always do as an audience.
Yes.
It's going to be a sequel. It's going to be awesome. No, it's not.
Yeah.
No. Way to trick me out of what 1997 movie rates were.
Trying to cash in, however, on the success of Mortal Kombat was Street Fighter.
Oh, God.
Wait, the first one or the Chun-Li one?
Street Fighter starring Jean-Claude Van Damme.
And Raul Julia.
That actually came out before Mortal Kombat.
Of course!
Really? I thought it came out after.
According to my list here, it came out December 23rd, 1994, whereas Mortal Kombat came out July 13th, 1995.
That's true.
Okay. For some reason, I thought Street Fighter came out after. All right. Then it's the other way around. Street Fighter, again, having some actors in it that were very well known. Raul Julia, the late, great Raul Julia.
The only good thing about that movie.
Yeah. Ming-Na was in it, too.
Of course!
But for me, it was a Tuesday.
This movie also... What, Grendel?
The Bison Dollar.
Yes, Raul Julia as M. Bison. This movie also opened to very horrible reviews. However, it was a financial success. It had a budget of $35 million, and it made just under $100 million. This was Raul Julia's last movie.
Unfortunately.
It was probably, how cheesy it was that finally did him in.
Oh.
Did that movie.
Actually, no, in all seriousness, Raul Julia was sick.
Yeah.
It wasn't just from the horrible cheese factory of Jean-Claude Van Damme.
It might have been that cheese that triggered the heart attack.
It could have been.
Of course.
Of course.
I saw this from beginning to end once as a kid. At that time, I was just getting into the Street Fighter series. And I don't remember too much about it. I seem to remember that, again, we're all used to Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter being fighting games, not a whole lot of plot. Now you try to give it a plot. At the same time...
Wait, Street Fighter had a plot?
Apparently.
I don't know, I've only seen the movie once, and I purged it from my mind. I literally have no recall of this.
That is lucky for you, because I was unfortunate enough to have a sister who was curious to buy the DVD and force me to sit down and watch it with her.
I am so sorry.
This was about a year and a half ago. I felt dirty.
It was... When you have games that don't have a whole lot of plot to begin with, and then you turn them into movies, and in doing so, give them a plot, at the same time removing what was fun about the games, not inserting them into the movies, will end up being, could make for a very, very bad movie. I mean, the profit that the movie made was probably largely because a lot of people who were fans of Street Fighter went to go see it. Most of them didn't like the movie, but Hollywood doesn't care about whether you like or dislike, they care about sales figures.
Mm-hmm.
I get the impression, though, as we've discussed these first 4 movies, all of them pretty much opened to horrible reviews. The thing is, though, video game movies, I think, they try too hard. They try too hard to appeal to as wide of an audience as they possibly can. In doing so, you alienate the gamers. Because you're trying to make the movie comprehensible to a wide range, you sacrifice some of the potential quality. Roger Ebert gives most of these movies, star, half a star.
Well, you really shouldn't listen to anything that man says, but...
Well, that's a matter of opinion, but a lot of professional film critics have never played any of these games, so they have no idea what they don't have a good idea of what it's being based on. So if they look at the movie and get extremely baffled by it, it's because they've never had the source material to reference their review on. I mean, take, for example, I'll jump to one of the recent video game movies. I'll jump to Silent Hill. Silent Hill, which I'm a big fan of the video game series. I saw this movie and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty good adaptation of the first 2 games.
I liked it up to when they took the first full of pyramid. Like, where'd all these people come from?
I enjoyed this movie because I knew, and I could follow along with the movie because I had played the first 2 games and thus knew what was going on. For example, on the flip side, Roger Ebert, who had never played any Silent Hill video game, he refuses to play video games. He says they're not worth his time. He saw Silent Hill and in his review gave it star ? And part of his reasoning was that he was just completely and utterly baffled and confused by the movie. He never played the games. He couldn't follow what was going on. I've played the games. I could follow and understand and enjoy what's going on. So there's a bit of a disconnect between professional moviegoers and game players.
And that's where you get the problem of movies catering to one audience, but then you have a movie that's actually catering to the right audience, but alienating the one that producers want to aim for.
Silent Hill the movie was made by people who had played the games, and Konami also had a big hand in making that movie. So therein lies the balance. Do you appeal to the fan base of the series, or do you try to cast a wide a net as possible when making an adaptation?
One of the big things I think when making one of these movies is yes, appeal to that hardcore gaming aspect, but you want to go after something that's a little open-ended so it might pull in that mainstream audience, though, the classic moviegoer audience. And I think that list of video games that would make a big movie hit is from a very small pool.
That's very true. And as we wind down this first half, I'll finish the first half with a video game franchise that ended up becoming very successful. We'll start with Tomb Raider. Like it or not, Danielle. Like it or not, Danielle.
The first one.
The two Tomb Raider movies, did actually very, very well at the box office, despite, again, horrible reviews. The first movie had a budget of $115 million, and it made worldwide just under $275 million.
And your reasoning why? 2 words. Angelina Jolie.
And her assets.
Well, keep in mind, that's what made the game franchise originally so famous.
Mm-hmm.
Grendel, you started to say something?
Oh, I said left and right when Danielle was mentioning her assets.
Oh, yes. But I mean, you'll agree though that was what originally made the Tomb Raider gaming franchise pretty famous. Was Lara Croft and her chest.
Yep.
Like all the descriptions were Indiana Jones with double B's.
Amen.
Oh, Grendel, that was good. I've never heard it described quite like that. Nicely, very well put. Tomb Raider 1 enjoyed such great fame despite abysmal reviews. The second movie was made with a slightly lower budget, $95 million, got slightly better reviews, and made $156 million, so another profit. This is a bit of an aberration. Usually horrible reviews don't translate into success, whereas in this case, despite the reviews, despite how bad the reviews were for these 2 Tomb Raider movies, they ended up becoming financial successes. Other than Angelina Jolie, why do you think that's the case?
I think because maybe the franchise was becoming a little more widely known.
Well,
just video movies in general.
I believe it's the opposite. I believe it was because the Tomb Raider population, at least to my knowledge, has been very low, at least from everyone I talk to, any page I read, it seemed to be very low, and therefore, when moviegoers see something like this, they think of it more like an Indiana Jones movie, and don't really think, oh, it's a game movie, and go and see it and say, hey, this is pretty good.
Well, I think that's kind of how they marketed it. Was more an adventure movie, downplaying the video game aspect.
And I completely agree with that. I don't remember any of the advertisements for it, so so I wouldn't know. But that's just what it feels like.
Grendel, you were saying?
No, I was agreeing with Daniel, saying the same thing.
So you think that the 2 Tomb Raider movies successfully appealed to a wider audience than its core gamers?
Exactly. It was like what I was just talking about earlier. It had that easy accessible to the mainstream while still attracting the hardcore gaming audience.
Yep.
But there wasn't anything in like the movie from the game that only someone who knew the games would really understand either, for the most part.
That's true. I mean, unlike Silent Hill, where there's, if you haven't played the game, forget trying to follow the movie.
Yeah.
Tomb Raider, Tomb Raider in the sense you didn't need to play the games to follow the movie.
Yeah, and it helps because the games are pretty much like an action movie altogether. I mean, yeah, there's puzzle solving and whatever, but I think the games themselves, because they fit so perfectly in that genre, I think it worked.
All right.
With jumps shooting bears.
That too. Alrighty, some good discussion all around. In the second half, we'll discuss more movies that ended up being successful, and what we think can make for an awesome video game movie. So, we'll keep this going. Have a drink, take a break, whatever. Do whatever you like. We'll be back for the second half of Downloadable Content.
Of course!
second half of downloadable content. We're discussing video game-based movies. We're all still here, I think.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh,
One dying.
Cricket.
So, continuing the discussion, we've talked about how the Tomb Raider movies ended up being pretty successful, successfully managing to cast a wide net in terms of its audience, while still maintaining some of its core elements, like Lara's breasts.
that's the important part.
After you get that part, nothing else matters about the game, or the movie for that matter.
God.
Let's get down to the bottom line.
No, let's just add some padding.
There's certainly enough there.
Oh, shut up! So, now you have great successes as Tomb Raider. Let's move on to even Final Fantasy even dabbled making some movies. They've made two major movies. One of them had a theatrical release. The other one went straight to DVD. Spirits Within. That was the movie. Also,
Sorry.
You guys.
It brought back really bad memories.
Suddenly he's having an epileptic seizure. Final Fantasy The Spirits Within was Square's first foray into movie making for a wide audience. I saw this movie. I kind of gave it it was sort of a meh sort of movie.
It was okay.
It ultimately got mixed reviews. It was made on a budget of $137 million, and it made only $85 million, so it was a flop at the box office. Grendel, have you seen this movie?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, tell me why you what do you think? What its shortcomings were? Why it failed to garner the mass appeal that the Final Fantasy series we've come to know.
Well, aside from the fact that it had nothing to really tie it in with Final Fantasy at all.
Besides names.
Well, even I think the only name I could remember from Final Fantasy was Sid.
Yeah.
All the rest of them were completely different, and all of it was like sci-fi, Earth-screwed, ghost alien, stuff like that. Weren't even Chocobos in it.
So basically, what you're saying is that Square abandoned what makes the series so great.
Pretty much.
They didn't have enough familiarity.
Yeah, and everything I was hearing about it, too, it's like a lot of people were kind of freaked out by the CGI actors.
Okay.
It was like the first non-Pixar full CGI movie where they tried to make them look real. So.
Well, they weren't as dead-eyed as, say, the Polar Express. It wasn't that bad.
I mean, I thought they did a pretty decent job with them. It wasn't as bad as Polar Express now. More my complaint with it was it just had nothing to do with the games at all. Nothing to tie it with.
Okay, that's a fair assessment. Nick?
I really am abstaining from all comments. I have attempted to purge this movie from my mind. Pretty much, absolutely.
Fine. Enough with you then.
It had nothing to do with the game. There was even no magic or any. It was a gunfight. It was like watching Halo. Halo the movie, based 10 years before the game actually hit.
Danielle?
I don't know. I mean, when I saw it, I was just as disappointed as anybody else. There's no fantasy element. They completely alienated pretty much their fan base. Because they got everybody's hopes up saying, hey, there's a Final Fantasy movie coming out. It has nothing to do with Final Fantasy. But then you kind of have to take it as its own by itself, because even Final Fantasy games kind of jump the gun and change with every installment. I mean, now with Final Fantasy 13, it's completely different. So you kind of have to take this with a grain of salt.
Well,
And I just want to know how Square screwed this up. In 1994, they came out with a direct-to-video movie called Final Fantasy: Legend of the Crystals, which took place after Final Fantasy V.
Okay.
And they nailed it. They got it right. They did so well on it. And obviously it wasn't a hit in the United States, but it was a huge hit in Japan.
Yeah, I remember that.
I mean, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within did have some big-name actors in it. Alec Baldwin, James Woods, Ming Na, Donald Sutherland. I mean, you had a
Take note that this is Ming Na's second video game related movie.
It had a lot of hype. I remember that. I mean, it was released in 2001. So already several big-name Final Fantasy games had already come out. 7 was still enjoying massive, copious amounts of popularity. But I'm getting the sense from all of our discussion on it that there was very few of the familiar elements that makes Final Fantasy a great game series. They tried to do something experimental and something new, but because it wasn't elements relating to the Final Fantasy game series that we've loved so much, it bombed.
Yeah.
Not enough familiarity.
I mean, you can't really blame them for trying to go into a different direction. It's only natural with companies. But just to be fair and just to be honest with the fans, they should have done something first before getting into this foray, just to please the fans.
Ultimately, though, they would end up trying to, make good on their mistake by releasing Advent Children, which was a straight-to-DVD movie. It did not have a theatrical release in the United States, and it did infinitely better than Spirits Within, I think partially due to the fact that it was a sequel to one of the best-selling Final Fantasy games of all time, number 7.
You have all the Cloud and Sephiroth fangirls going for it.
Say again, Grendel? You were a little muffled there.
That it was all the Sephiroth and Cloud fangirls buying it.
And fanboy, I was one of them.
You are, Brian.
Oh, yes.
But you raised a very good, you raised the excellent point of they took something that was very familiar, very universally accepted by the video game fan base, and just skipped the theater altogether, went straight to DVD, and did well enough for them.
Again, but I mean, there was, in the case of Advent Children, there was a lot of familiarity. It banked itself on the success of Final Fantasy VII.
It was a direct sequel, basically, at least as far as the plot went.
Yes, it took place 2 years after the end of the game.
And remember that this was supposed to be a game first. This was supposed to be Final Fantasy VII 2. And there was so much cutscene that Square just scrapped the whole game mechanics and just said, fine, we'll just make a full movie out of this.
And they did.
And they banked on the fact that there were enough Final Fantasy VII fans out there to warrant the release of this movie. They did it, and it worked.
Yeah, but my major problem with that movie, and it kind of ruins it for me as a fan of the original game, is that when they were modeling this movie, they're aiming it more for the anime fans of the time, with those added silver-haired bad guys that are so emo, it hurts. And I felt like I did not get into it as much as I wanted to, because there was that fact that it's just like it was so emo. Everybody was depressed. Everybody just looked sad. It wasn't what I had hoped, having played the game. It just felt different to me.
Yeah, they could have done it based off of 8. Really go emo with Squall.
Yeah.
Then we're just going full blown scale.
Yeah, and I mean, true. Cloud was pretty depressed. Granted, with every piece of crap that happened to him in the game, but with those added characters, he went full blown emo.
Well, that might have turned some people off of it, but it turned enough of a profit where it was infinitely successful. Again, the fact that it was banking on the fan base of Final Fantasy VII helped it, and
and then it grew substantially since 7 came out.
Yes. So a lot of familiarity there led to the success of that particular movie.
Mm-hmm.
We switch gears now to a movie franchise that I really think should not be as successful as it is. I have a personal grudge against the Resident Evil movies.
Sorry.
I personally have a grudge against the Resident Evil movies because I love the game series. I love the Resident Evil franchise. I've played every game. I love it. It's great. Then I went and saw the first 2 movies and weeped.
Jill didn't even do anything for the second one when they had it.
I mean, plot analysis aside, these movies are nothing like their games. And again, as we mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, as we were talking about Mortal Kombat and, pretend that it's not trying to take itself seriously. Pretend that it just happens to be a movie that just happens to have these characters in it.
But you can't with this film. It takes itself way too seriously.
Yet it's a very, very, very successful franchise for Hollywood. The first Resident Evil movie, piss poor reviews, budget of $32 million, it made $102 million. Big profit there. The second movie, horrible reviews, budget $45 million, it made $129 million. The third movie, bad reviews, same budget, it made a bigger profit, $148 million. And the most recent one, the fourth, had a budget of $60 million and made just under $300 million. So these movies have been, despite the horrible reviews that every single one of these movies get, they have been hugely successful for Hollywood. Why?
The Jovovich is high.
Aside from that, let's not use the Angelina Jolie theory.
I think they've dumbed it down enough that just about anybody could access these films. And plus, weren't they all summer blockbusters?
Yes.
Yes, so that in itself turns in more of a profit because people have, more time to spend, crapping themselves with glee over something as stupid as, these summer blockbusters.
I was saying the Resident Evil movies, they're, aside from like the first 2 where they mentioned Raccoon City, they're kind of generic enough that they could be any movie just about.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
I could see that.
Nick?
As one who has never played a Resident Evil game and has never even wanted to see the Resident Evil movies, I personally have no opinion here on this matter.
Alright, then fuck off.
Well...
Alright. So, I saw the first 2 movies, and this is, I try not to be a purist in most things. I try to look at these things from a different perspective. I can't with the Resident Evil series. I've devoted way too much money, time, and energy to this series. There's no Ada, or if there is, it's not as nice as the game Ada. But
the 5-minute cameo where she gets eaten.
Yeah, I mean, really? Really?
Listen, second movie, and then she wasn't even in the third one.
I mean,
and she was like, you wouldn't even know it was Claire.
I can't even... this just goes above and beyond suspension of disbelief. I can't even put myself in a frame of mind that this is a movie that just happens to have somebody named Nemesis or Wesker or Claire. I can't even do that. I've seen the first two movies, and I've wanted to puke. For me, there's no familiarity because it takes all of the source material and chucks it in the garbage.
Shredder, then garbage.
It's really bad with the third one, where it's like, aside from the whole, you wouldn't even know Claire was Claire, where it's like, Mila Jovovich's character suddenly has Jedi mind powers.
So, do you think that, somebody mentioned that these movies have enough of a generic zombie action movie plot where it's become accessible?
Yeah. Well, at the time you had... Didn't the remake for Dawn of the Dead come out around the same time, too?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're kind of banking on, at the time, the same formula that was instantly getting popular and gaining in popularity.
I think you had Shaun of the Dead was coming out in the U.S. around that time, too.
Mm-hmm.
Zombie thing going on.
Yeah. And that one turned into a hit, too.
That was good.
So good for Hollywood, but do you think that recent movies like Resident Evil, Prince of Persia, do you think that Hollywood and the studios are alienating their core gamer fans by appealing to a wider audience?
Completely.
Pretty much.
And it doesn't just hurt the fans. I feel it hurts the creators as well. That's not what they envisioned when they came up with these games.
Well, they're the ones that sold the rights to make the movie.
True. But then again, you're looking at it and you're just... it's still alienating pretty much anybody that had any kind of affiliation with these games.
Well, try telling that to Hollywood. Prince of Persia. When you have the main character of the movie played by somebody who's not Persian,
not remotely Persian,
who is actually white as white can white,
whiter than white bread.
Prince of Persia turned a profit. Prince of Persia had a budget of $200 million, and it made $335 million worldwide.
But remember, it's backed by Disney. And like I said,
I think
Disney's
that played
gonna
a
market
huge
shit out of it. It did.
Nick, elaborate.
Well, you're taking you're taking the concept, you're giving it in the hands of a director who has already had, what the hell's his name?
Jerry Bruckheimer did Prince of Persia.
Thank you. Bruckheimer, who, if I'm not mistaken, did the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Yes, he did.
You're throwing out these names out there. You aired the world premiere preview during the Super Bowl, of all places. You throw in a couple name drops, and all of a sudden people want to go see this. And for the most part, Prince of Persia followed the core the core concept of the Sands of Time. They did a pretty good job squeezing it into a 2-hour film. And okay, so maybe it's not, maybe it is kind of shunning the hardcore gamers a little bit, but, gotta give Disney credit for making what I feel was a very good film with what little they could work with in a time frame. I think the time frame really affected, the true authenticity of the game.
Okay. The movie itself is based on the video game, based on the Prince of Persia game, The Sands of Time.
I think it was actually based off the trilogy, if I wasn't mistaken. I think it was based off all 3 games, but...
Would be based off all 3.
Okay. Obviously it did well. It did very well at the box office. Having never played the games, I have no idea how much of the movie stayed faithful to the source material.
It actually was pretty close. Obviously changes were made to, fit within the time frame of the movie, but for the most part, I personally feel they did a pretty good job.
Okay.
Even jumping off walls.
Okay. So, I'm willing to believe that lended some success to the fact that they did keep pretty faithfully to the source material.
I think it was another one where they were advertising it more as an action movie than it's based on a video game.
And ultimately was successful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And same thing, Resident Evil, which barely uses any of the source material and takes great liberties, also successful. So, I mean, part of it has to be that you have to play to the right audience.
Well, especially because the moviegoer audience is not exactly the same as the video gaming audience. You do have to alter things a little bit differently, and maybe that's why video game movies don't do nearly as well. Is because the two audiences are not one and the same.
Well, the thing with Disney is that it's playing to a bigger stage. It's already got a base where they have gaming fans, thanks to, Kingdom Hearts. You've got the animation fans, you've got their movie audience. So they're playing to a bigger stage. That's why it did so well.
Oh, absolutely. The names themselves of who was directing and who was, funding it, that plays a huge role. That plays a huge role.
People there, too.
It did have. I mean, Prince of Persia had very, very big name stars. You had Jake Gyllenhaal, Ben Kingsley, Alfred Molina. Not to mention that you had the music done by a very accomplished film and video game composer, Harry Gregson Williams. Harry Gregson Williams being the composer for the Metal Gear Solid series of games, who's also had success in movies. He did the Shrek movies. He did the first two Narnia movies. So, a lot of that helped Disney, and I think, if it stays true to the original source material, then I think you might have a decent movie. And now we're going to wind down here. We'll spend the last few minutes of this talking about what we think could make a video game movie great. I mean, obviously, advertising helps, having the right actors helps, having a sense of familiarity to the original source material helps. I also wish that game studios, the people who make these games, have more of an active role. We see too many times game developers fork over the rights to make the movies, and then when the movies actually begin being made, the studio who made the game is pretty much locked out of making the movie.
Yet at the same time, you don't want the gaming company to have too much control.
Why though? Why is giving the studio who made the game more creative control a bad thing?
Well, I can't name any one particular movie because I don't think it's happened yet. But let's take a TV to video game concept. Let's take Superman 64. I really don't want to use. Yeah, I know. But a lot of their problems, as I found out in an interview with the producer of the game, that he wasn't able to do 90% of what he wanted to do because his licensor, DC and Warner Brothers, wouldn't let them.
Okay, now you're talking about different franchises, though. I mean,
I am. I know what I'm talking about is a bit of a stretch, but the point I'm trying to say here is there needs to be unity between one group and the other group. You need to have the person handing over the rights to be able to have a say and work with the director and work with whoever it is, but at the same time you need to let the director, producer, whatever, be able to work his creativity into anything, movie, video game, television show, what have you.
Okay.
I think that there's a give and take there. Yes, you shouldn't just hand over the rights and say do whatever you want, but at the same time, you shouldn't be, overseeing and having the final say on every single detail and saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
So essentially, you're saying there has to be a compromise.
There has to be, and I think that goes with anything: video games, movies, TV, what have you.
Fair enough. I mean, I would like to see, though, because historically, game studios get shut out of the movie-making process. You have few exceptions. Silent Hill, for example, Konami had a big hand in that, even using the same composer, for example. I would like to see more work between the two. I think it would help, because, if you have a movie studio talking and working with the people who, made the game, instead of having a director put his complete, stamp on it. I mean, yes, I understand creative control. Yes, I understand a director's interpretation. But if one of the goals of the movie is to try to appeal to its fans, I think that the director, the movie studio, should have more conversation and work with the people who actually made the game. I mean, the people who made the game and provided it's a successful game know what they're doing. They know what made the game successful. Why not let them work with the director?
That would make sense. That's why they don't do it.
Yeah, it makes too much sense. Again, that's why they're not going to do it.
You're kind of glazing. You're kind of you're touching back again to the point I was trying to make is that whole working together thing, that whole give and take.
And that's really not going to happen with Hollywood.
No, absolutely not. And that's why there are so many bad movies based off games, is because there is none of that communication. But then if you do have that communication, then you're running the risk of being hitting too much of a niche audience, and you're shutting out half the mainstream.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's really a no-win, no matter how you look at it.
I'm inclined to think that there can be. I mean, again, I'm using Silent Hill as the example. Silent Hill was made by people who played the game, knew the source material. The director worked with Konami to make the movie. It did end up being, a moderate success.
They're making a second one already, so.
Yeah, they've been making a second one since the first one came out. So I'll believe that when I see it. The director worked with Konami to help make the movie. The unfortunate, and as going back to what Nick said, the unfortunate thing, what happened was, even though the movie was a moderate success, you failed to gather a large part of the mainstream audience. And video games by themselves are a niche market to begin with. Any video game.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, say Final Fantasy or Resident Evil enjoys millions and millions of video game fans all over the world. Are they all going to go see a good and proper Resident Evil movie? Probably not.
They might if it's good enough.
They might. They might if it's good enough.
People for Resident Evil, movie franchise soon, so we're planning it before the fourth one even came out on theater.
I think Resident Evil, which has been crazily successful, I think it's reached the point now where if you try to make a fifth Resident Evil movie and bring it back to something resembling the source material, I don't think it would work.
No, I agree with you on that.
A reboot.
Yes, of course.
They don't want money, but they don't want to give us a franchise.
Well, that would be kind of like pulling a Star Trek on the audience. Kind of like pulling out everything we've ever known, and then finally saying, hey, this is a reboot, not a continuation.
That's true. I understand that for some video games, you cannot accurately reproduce the source material. For example, in the first, I mean, yes, I'm a purist for the Resident Evil series, but I have to understand that you cannot stay true to the source material of the early Resident Evil games because there's a lot of back and forth, repetitive puzzle solving and things like that.
And some of the line after of unlocking.
Oh, well, yes, I'm not talking about using the script from Resident Evil 1. Are you crazy?
Capcom writing the script to a movie, yeah. Actually, I would go see that just for that laugh alone.
You almost became a Jill sandwich.
Didn't you, wasn't there a Resident Evil movie that came out recently?
It was a direct-to-DVD. It was a direct-to-DVD video. It was called,
The CGI one.
What?
It was all CGI, I think.
It was all CGI.
Seen it yet, so.
Degeneration. Resident Evil Degeneration.
There you go.
Which was made by Capcom. And it is in line with the game universe. It takes place after Resident Evil 4 and stars Leon Kennedy. Using a good number of the voice actors from the game series for that movie. I have yet to see it. It's still sitting in its shrink wrap.
I'm actually surprised at you.
I know.
I actually saw it, and I thought it was pretty good. Even though I haven't actually sat down and played all the games, I've watched people do it. But I sat down, and even I could say, hey, as an outsider watching a video game movie, I actually enjoyed it and was able to follow along.
Oh, good. So what I'm gathering here from the conversation that it really, to make a great video game movie, there needs to be some element of familiarity with the source material, but at the same time, trying to get that delicate balance where you can get a large number of moviegoers. If you make the game if you try to use too much of the source material, say in the case of Silent Hill, you're not going to get a lot of mainstream moviegoers because they're all going to be utterly baffled.
Dumbfounded.
So, it's a finicky thing, trying, especially with video games being as interactive media as it is, it's very hard to make a successful transition. It's very hard to make a successful transition because, again, you have to think about your fan base and you also have to think about how much money your movie's going to take in.
Yeah, it's like the BioShock movie.
Say again?
That's what kind of killed the BioShock movie. All the money it would have cost to make it. And the director wanted to make it PG-13, or no, not that R. I mean, he was going for an R rating with it. And they were finally like, "Yeah, this is going to cost too much money."
Which is sad because I would love to see a BioShock movie.
That would certainly be interesting.
Yeah.
Witness the Rapture in real life movies. And then would you kindly reattach your jaw?
Only slightly. Only slightly. So it's a finicky issue, and hopefully we'll get to see a video game movie that not only gets great reviews, but also, makes a lot of money and also appeals to its fan base by not throwing out what made the game so good. One of these days, I'd love to see. I don't think we'll ever see this in our lifetime. I'd love to see a video game movie win the Academy Award for Best Picture.
That will never happen, and you know it.
Yeah.
That's why I said.
If the Academy can't even accept comedies as a valid form of entertainment for the consideration.
Say again, Grendel?
Said they barely accept sci-fi.
Yeah.
That's true. But I think we've come to the end of this little discussion. In our next episode, we shift from video game movies to something infinitely more happier, although maybe not as chaotic. We talk Sonic the Hedgehog. It is his 20th anniversary this year. Oh my god, Sonic 1 came out in 91. I was alive in 91.
I think pretty much most of us were.
Yeah. It makes you feel kind of old, doesn't it, Brian?
Well,
I'm older than him, and I feel old.
I'm 26 now, so yeah, I'm ridiculously old here.
Regardless, we're going to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog. It's an all-Sonic episode. We talk about his highlights, his great points, our fun experiences, his dismal, and then Sonic's dismal experiences.
Hey, I
One
enjoy
word, werehog.
No.
Oh,
So we discussed the birth, the fall, and the resurrection of the Blue Hedgehog we've come to know and love. That is on the next episode of Downloadable Content. So once again, I'd like to thank Grendel, Nick, and Danielle for beating this issue to death, and we will see you next time. Have a good one, everyone.